next up is something. So this story, isn't surprising. This next story that we have coming up was very surprising to me personally, but we talked about it a little bit. Maybe not so surprising to you. The firing of Brian Flores from Miami.
Yes. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say it. The last 2 seasons were winning seasons for him. It seemed like a strong defensive team. It seemed like a team that was playing above their level. So it was very surprising to me. What about you?
So, there's reports coming out that there was a lot of conflict with Miami leadership, specifically GM Chris Grier with Brian Flores, and from Brian Flores to quarterback Tua, the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. And one of the things that a lot of people don't really think about is that the head coach is basically like the middle manager, right? Because you got the owner who's like runs everything, he owns everything. The GM, director of pro football operations, all that kind of stuff. Like they're kind of like the guy in charge of the team, right? That how the football team runs, and the head coach usually reports to him. The head coach then has his staff, and then right on par with his staff is the quarterback, and then it's the players. So the quarterback is really the reports up to the coach, and that quarterback is that coach's number one employee. And obviously that coach's boss is the GM. So the head coach has to really manage 2 key relationships to his GM and his quarterback. That's a big part of being a head coach. And all the reports out of Miami were that Chris Grier, the GM, and Brian Flores didn't get along at all. They were always butting heads, always in big fights, and that there were even bigger fights coming out of Miami between Brian Flores and Tua. And I think you got a little story on that, right?
Yeah, I had a report from this past game. I believe they were playing Tennessee over the weekend. And this reporter states that it all started at halftime. There was a locker room meltdown between Coach Brian Flores, who was angry at quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, and his dismal performance in the first half of the game. They had like a little bit of a shouting match. He said stuff to Tua. Tua fired back at him. The F-bomb was dropped a couple of times. And Tua said something about Brian Flores not being able to talk to people properly. And then Flores immediately fired back and said, well, I might not be able to talk to people, but we need better effing quarterback play on this team. So, I mean, you're shooting shots at your quarterback during the game. Like you said, there was definitely some tension between them.
And remember, the NFL is very corporate, right? Where it's obviously a huge business. So you have to follow a certain set of procedures and guidelines and things like that with how you handle people, right? It's not like high school where you can like have a big fight and you can like, tear up the locker room or get in like some just like wild, crazy stuff happens. It has to be very, very, buttoned up, cleaned up. It's got to be a very formal, so to speak, environment where, there's a lot of communication up and down the chain of command. And when that doesn't happen, in an organization, bad things tend to happen. Now, credit to Flores' defensive coaching, because if this kind of stuff was going on in the locker room and with his GM, the fact they're able to win 19 games over the last 2 seasons is a credit to the talent on the team and his coaching in terms of like game plan and evaluation. But this stuff never ends well. That's the kind of thing that divides a locker room immediately. It irritates scouting departments, GMs. It gets the owner upset. Like it just creates a massive divide. And think about it this way. Like imagine if you're the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach for Miami, right? You're working with Tua, trying to get Tua better. But your boss, Brian Flores, hates Tua. So you're kind of in a tough position. What do you do? Do you try and like, you support Tua in front of your boss, even though your boss doesn't like Tua, so you're going to hurt your own chances, or are you going to just ignore Tua and Tua is going to get worse as a player? Like it's such a bad situation, and it's really unprofessional. And I think that's why owner Stephen Ross decided to pull the plug on Brian Flores, because I think he was worried this was going to go down in tailspin really, really quickly. And I think Ross, the owner, and Grier, the GM, realizes that after being absolutely terrible for a number of years, having like no talent, I think they feel like they've got a good enough core to be competitive, and enough coaches could come in and coach the team in at least a good enough way to be just as good or at least close as Flores. I think they felt it was better to just get rid of that potential distraction and that potential blow up and move on. Now we'll see if that's the case or not, but I think that's what they were thinking.
And with hot commodities like Jim Harbaugh coming into the market, Ross being a Michigan man, stating he didn't want to be the one to hire Harbaugh away from Michigan, a school he donates hundreds of millions of dollars to, I am yet to be convinced that he's not going to try to go after Harbaugh if Harbaugh is interested in coaching in the NFL again. But one thing I thought was interesting is, okay, Flores apparently has had issues with young quarterbacks who aren't performing quite at the level that he wanted or expected them to play. And he gets fired for it, obviously. Who's the first team to come knocking at his door? The Chicago Bears have arranged an interview with Flores to be their new head coach, who have Justin Fields, another young quarterback who's had inconsistency. It's like, maybe we don't know the whole story, and maybe Flores wasn't the problem. Maybe it is Tua, maybe it is Grier. But, is this the first guy that you want to go after with your young quarterback if he's already butted heads with Tua?
No, absolutely not. And I don't think he'll be picked up by Chicago, because that'll always be in the back of Chicago's mind. And the thing is, a lot of when you have that young quarterback, you need to have the right, sort of support system around him. You need to have a McVay, a Kyle Shanahan, a Zach Taylor, a good offensive coordinator, a patient head coach. Lamar has that with Roman and Harbaugh. Prescott had that with Kellen Moore, right? When you need to have that environment around you as a young quarterback to kind of get comfortable and in control. Fields did not have that in Chicago last year with Nagy. That's why they got rid of Nagy, right? He couldn't get it done, wasn't creating good enough environment for him. If they bring in Flores, it's going to be more of the same. So I don't see any reason why the Bears would sign Flores to become their new head coach. But I think it's just really indicative of how much the NFL has become essentially, creating an environment that's good for a young quarterback. And that's all you need to do as a coach. If you can do that, we'll keep you along, as long as we need. But if you can't do that, we're going to get rid of you. And you look at every coach, right, who's gotten fired. It seems like, hey, he's not good for the quarterback. Get him out of here.